So why don't we learn? Why don't we learn? It seems like every time there's economic crisis in American history, we respond in similar ways. They fail. They don't actually produce the results the economists predict. And, you know, we come out of the crisis somehow, but it's not linked to what government is doing. And yet, every time there's another financial crisis, another economic crisis, we try it all again, hoping that this time it'll actually work. So what's the problems? There are basically three with people who don't, who repeat mistakes. One is that they just don't know history. They just don't know. Nobody teaches them history. You talk about the Great Depression, nobody knows. I mean, people have vague notion of a dust bowl and people suffering. And then what do we teach about FDR in schools? That he was a hero, that he saved the U.S. from the Great Depression, that all his programs actually worked. So people are really, really, really ignorant. They're confused by their teachers. So they don't actually know the facts. Now, when you don't know history, you are destined to repeat it. So the first thing you have to do in order to avoid repeating mistakes is to recognize what actually happened. And none of that is happening today. We don't teach the Great Depression. We certainly don't teach the economic history of the 70s. We don't teach the economic history of that. You know, what do people think about when they think about the 19th century? I get this all the time. What's memorable about this period of industrialization in the U.S.? Child labor, right? Pollution, monopolies, right? Robber barons, bad stuff. So this great era of industrial production that made possible everything we have around us is taught to kids today, and I think for a very long time. This isn't new. It's been taught for the last 20, 30, 40 years to kids. That this was an awful era, that this was a horrible time, that people suffered, that capitalism destroyed their lives, that we're still paying the price for all the evil created back then. Right? If you saw the debate last night, that was David Callahan's point. The 19th century was terrible. It's only when government got involved that things start getting good. Now, if you learn that history, then you're going to keep repeating it. If you learn that government intervention improves things, that's the historical fact you're taught, then you're going to advocate for more government intervention. And that's what we teach our kids. That's what we teach our kids in high schools, and that's what we teach our kids in colleges. We actually start teaching them this stuff in kindergarten, just to make sure that they get it. And we repeat it over and over and over and over again, just to make sure. But it's really, really important. One of the only ways that we're going to really make a dent out there in the culture is that we have to return to the facts. We have to educate people about what actually happened, what actually works, and what actually doesn't work. Reason number two is that people don't know economics. It's to explain economic phenomena, to explain economic ideas right, is difficult, and we have to recognize that. It's not self-evident to people that the economics of capitalism, the economics of freedom, how they work and what they mean, and that it actually does what it's supposed to do. I think the most fundamental reason people don't learn from history, they are destined to repeat mistakes, is philosophy, is their ideas. And this is not just in economics. This is not true just of macroeconomic, microeconomic policy. This is true of life. People don't learn from experience. People think that people do, but they don't. And the reason they don't is fundamentally they understand their experiences based on their ideas, based on the philosophy that they hold. So people are driven by philosophy. They're driven by ideas. Okay? if you believe that your life belongs to others, if you believe that equality is the standard of morality, or that sacrifice is the standard of morality, then the fact that that free market economics works is irrelevant to you. It doesn't make any difference. Because you're not about working. You're not about anything working. You're not about creating wealth and prosperity and happiness and freedom. You're about equality, which turns out is the exact opposite of all those things I talked about. If you believe that human beings are basically irrational, if you believe that we're motivated predominantly by emotion, that rationality we're incapable of, or it's really, really rare, that we learn about the world through our emotions, or we learn about the world through some kind of mystical revelation, then what is history? How do we know it? Who's going to tell us about it? Our emotions? Revelation? Where's it going to come from? How do we know what's fact and what isn't fact? What's true and what isn't true? We're much more likely in those circumstances to buy in completely, wholeheartedly, into the way history is taught today and into the bogus economics that is taught today. They're an authority figure. They must have got the revelation that you missed. Right? They're the philosopher kings who see the light and you don't. So if you believe that people, as I think a lot of people in our culture believe, that they're fundamentally irrational, fundamentally emotional beings, then freedom doesn't work and can't work, and you can't understand how it would work. Freedom requires a belief in man as a rational animal, as capable of rationality, and as exercising that rationality when he's free. And if you dismiss that premise, you can't defend economics, you can't defend freedom, you can't defend all the other stuff, and you can't even teach history.